Okay, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. Wherever you might be, we've got people from Belgium, Turkey, Maryland, Thailand, Texas, the UK, and all over the place. So welcome to everyone. This is David I. here in Scotts Valley, California, where the sun is just coming up. This is the first of 2 days of CodeRage Mobile, and it's great to have you all here. You can take part in the conversation on Twitter by using the hashtag CodeRage. People have already been putting things up there. It's great. That way you can talk to each other and share thoughts and ideas about mobile development. And you can also use the Q&A area of the GoToWebinar software to queue up questions as people. Oh, hello, Poland. Excellent. People are checking in from all over the world, which is great. So you can use the Q&A area of the GoToWebinar software. And good evening from Russia. Excellent, Yaroslav. And woohoo, UK, Xander, great. We're going to record all the sessions in Q&A. So I'm going to start the recording here just to let you know. It might say start recording for this opening session. And Fort Worth, Texas, excellent. And good evening from India, great. Again, people from all over, which is fabulous. We have a lot of Embarcadero staff members online to help you. Here in the studio is John Thomas, JT.
Good morning, everyone.
And also Steve Haney.
Hello.
And then over in the Maidenhead UK office, there's a whole host of folks there. Jason Vokes. Jason, good afternoon for you.
Hey, guys.
And Marco Cantu is in Maidenhead instead of Piacenza, Italy. Marco.
Yes, I'm here as well.
Excellent. And finally, Stephen Ball. Stephen, over in the UK, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon, David.
So excellent. We have, I live crazy near Maidenhead, Xander says. We've got Orlando, Florida, and Jordan. It's excellent to have you all here with us. So use the hashtag CodeRage. This over here is the schedule for today. We have some 1 hour sessions and some half-hour sessions throughout the day, and we'll just be powering right through each one of them, and then end the day around 1 o'clock or so Pacific time, and then start it all again tomorrow morning 6 a.m. with the whole schedule. You can also look at the schedule online, of course. CodeRage. Just go to thecoderage.com. Of course, you had to get there to register. It'll redirect to Embarcadero and so on. I also wanted to remind everybody about some special offers that are going on until June 30th. I also have a slide to make it a little bit easier to see. So offers, tomorrow we have Bruno Ferenz from TMS Software. He's got a great presentation on using their Cloud Pak components for iOS to connect to Dropbox, SkyDrive, Twitter, Facebook, and more. Marco is doing a session tomorrow on how to take your VCL applications and convert them to FireMonkey and iOS applications. Of course, FireMonkey for Windows, Mac, and iOS. And that's using the Media Converter, which is a special promo offer, the Embarcadero edition. Serena will talk in the user interface about different styles, and if you upgrade to XE4, we have the Premium Style Pack. And for those of you that may not have access to a Macintosh or someone who has a Macintosh to build and test iOS apps, we have a special offer with the Mac in Cloud people. Just go to macincloud.com. And if you're an XE4 customer, they have the ability to use a Mac in the cloud that already has Xcode and the Platform Assistant Server. More about that in a bit, so that you can use the simulator to develop your iOS applications by going from your Windows PC to a Macintosh in the cloud. And so there's a special offer there, and all the information is online at embarcadero.com/rad offer. So again, great to have you all here. Lots of people still joining us. And if we go back to, that's the rad offer page again for that. As always, our doc wiki is updated every day, real time, every hour, every minute. So the latest information. There's a great set of tutorials in the DocWiki for Delphi iOS application development. We'll talk more about that throughout the coming 2 days. So it's great. Again, you'll see in these sessions today and tomorrow and in the replays all the great things that you can do for building Delphi iOS applications that'll help you move into the future on additional devices and platforms. And all of that is available for you. And with that, I'm going to switch to our opening keynote. And we'll start that up with JT, John Thomas, Director of Product Management, Steve Haney, Director of Product Marketing, and me, your host here for these 2 days of fun with mobile development.
Thank you, David. Yeah, this is a lot of fun. It's great to kick this off. It's going to be a fun event talking it's all focused on mobile today.
I think the other thing is you guys, last week was Apple WWDC. I know that's on front of mind, and there'll be conversations about that. And then a few weeks before that, Google I/O was also in San Francisco. We were like totally close to all sorts of cool stuff happening with iOS and Android. I think you guys were also at an alternative WWDC in San Francisco, right?
That's right, Alt WWDC. It was a free event for people who were attending WWDC and wanted more content. So Steve and I did a talk on rapid prototyping. So we did a live action role-playing scenario. Steve was the customer. It was a lot like we did for the
webinar?
For the webinar.
Okay.
But we did this in 15 minutes. We built an app from paper napkin to prototype in 15 minutes in front of this audience. So it was a lot of fun.
With real paper napkin, and maybe, did you have like a chef's outfit and chef's hat on, Steve?
I did.
Oh,
I should have got a picture of that.
Oh, very cool. Okay, so I'm going to turn it over to Steve, I think, first, and JT, and all of us. And again, it's great to have you all here.
And real quick,
oh,
David,
sorry.
Before we get Steve on there, I want to thank Steve for joining us today. Steve has joined Embarcadero several months ago. He has a lot of experience in the mobile space, and so he brings a fresh perspective to Embarcadero, particularly around mobile. So really looking forward to hearing what he has to say about why mobile is important this morning.
So in terms of, setting up these next few slides, we realized that, our developers definitely have not been living in a cave the past few years. You've all used touch-enabled devices, and you're familiar with the trends going on. But we thought it might be good to give a little bit of perspective in terms of how you look at the world and approach the world, and what it means with mobile coming in as a very new model, and dare I say it, paradigm for the way people interact with content and information and data. And so in that respect, it very much is a new world. So, we call this the inevitability of mobility. And I know that I tried to say that 5 times fast, but we kind of like the cadence. And it really all started in 2007. I mean, the iPhone really was just this, nuclear event that I'm not sure everybody realized it at the time, but, everybody thought it was a mobile phone. And yes, it is a mobile phone. It is a smartphone, but it was really the small pocket computer that had this, amazing new user experience. And it kind of changed the way we looked at information technology. And it started a trend you can see here. This is one of Mary Meeker's slides. She is a venture capitalist and analyst at a Silicon Valley venture fund called Kleiner Perkins. And if we could move to the next slide, please. I've just got it expanded a little bigger out there. And this kind of tells the whole story. For, a couple of decades there, we were living in a pretty straightforward world where you were developing Windows applications that compiled to an x86 instruction set. And over the past 5 years, that's dramatically changed where, Wintel is only going to make up about 35% of the addressable market. Because the reality is most users have moved to these mobile devices, whether they be smartphones or tablets, to do much of their data and information consumption, communication, and interaction with the rest of the world. as we said, we feel that this whole trend within the industry is inevitable. You can't not get on board. And the waves of this tsunami are still washing over the industry. There are a lot of players that are, I think if you listen to the analysts and the press, are roundly criticized for still trying to go after this market, given that there are two large players which dominate. But things are still up for grabs. The dynamics are still very exciting and fast moving. So you do have the new Windows 8, formerly Metro, and Windows Phone and BlackBerry, along with Android and iOS, which dominate the landscape now. And all these new ecosystems are rich with opportunity. It's still early days, even though it may seem like the train has left the station. A lot of exciting things going on, and a lot of unknowns, to the point where developers are the crown jewels of the industry right now. I was reading a couple of days ago where it's rumored that Microsoft is paying up to $100,000 to developers to come develop for Windows Phone. So the calculus is still there, where it makes a lot of sense for these platform vendors to court developers. So we're in great shape. The developers are really the folks who are being chased after and coveted in this new world, for multiple different platforms and different opportunities. So as long as I've been in this industry, it's been quite a while. I've got more than one gray hair. I've never seen the digital landscape so exciting, so dynamic, and so rich with opportunity. So it's a great time to be alive. So if this is a new world, what does this new planet look like? And again, we're probably not going to be sharing too much. It's eye-opening here. We know you guys are familiar with what's going on, but we thought it would be nice to sum this up and set the stage for what we're going to be doing over the next couple of days.
And again, Steve, the whole mobile landscape, I mean, this has been brewing, to coin a phrase maybe from Qualcomm, I'm not sure, or punning, I'm not. This has been coming on for a long, long time, and we've had the Symbian system, we've had other kinds of mobile platforms over the past, but nothing like the tsunami that's been happening the last couple of years with iPad, now with iOS, Android. I mean, this stuff is just accelerating so fast, and we're just happy to be able to help developers approach the technology in a rad way. All right.
Yeah, just an observation, David. Sorry to interrupt.
That's okay,
Steve. It's a lot like what you saw happen in the console space, where companies like Nintendo and Sony had a walled garden for developers. Previously, it was hard to get a lot of content, a quantity of content through those channels. You had to pay a lot of money, and you had to, be able to do certain things in order to get into that. And it was a lot like that in the mobile phone industry for a long time too, with Brew and J2 Media to some extent. The distribution channels weren't quite there. And so what iPhone did in particular was really open that up. The distribution channel is, I think, what mainly changed the view of the world, and made developers such a important resource for this new world too.
Yeah, I mean, I think if there's one thing we do really well in Silicon Valley, and certainly the folks up in Redmond understand it very, very well, is developers, and creating an ecosystem where two guys in a garage can build a huge company. And the efforts that came before, and I know I was there. I mean, I did my first startup in '98 around the Palm OS, and then did a lot of work with a lot of startups around J2ME and Brew. Those ecosystems, even though there was, folks were earnest and they cared and they wanted these things to move forward, the developer was not at the center. And I think one thing we can thank Apple and Google for is that they really put the developer at the center, and understood that if we create a platform, and what was fascinating about this too is it wasn't just coders as developers. they allowed all kinds of content in. You know, folks from the copyrighted content industry, as I call it, so movies, music, etc. And all of a sudden, you had a digital infrastructure that served a number of people. But again, Apple II, Macintosh, Windows, you know, these were all kind of commercial controlled environments that were open enough to two guys in a garage so that you could create a lot of wealth around this. You know, obviously I should mention the internet and HTML5, no slouch there in terms of creating a lot of wealth and opportunity for developers as well. But, you know, around mobile, we just had these, you know, two ecosystems that really did give it a boost. So, and to be fair, those guys, you know, Apple and Google learned a lot from what came before. You know, they saw what Sun did with various global carriers around J2ME, what Qualcomm had to accomplish with Brew. Brew was very lucrative for a lot of folks for many years in North America. But, you know, it was just tweaking the model, creating certain dynamics. A lot of that was personalities. Folks like Steve Jobs could push things through with the carriers and the various industries that, you know, other folks just couldn't. So everything kind of came together to create this new landscape we're in. And like I said, I've never seen anything so exciting and dynamic in all my years of computing.
And Steve, if you've shared lots of statistics, not only here, but with us when you came in. And I always think about a couple things, the sort of breadth of devices, not only today, but the things we're seeing at Consumer Electronics Show and developer conferences going forward. So just the sheer number of devices, both in consumers' hands as well as inside of enterprises, is one measure of the opportunity for developers inside or outside of their firewall, right?
Correct.
And then the number of apps. You also point to the number of apps. I think you had mentioned to me about this is an opportunity for developers to make money on the platforms, in addition, as you were talking about, whether it's startups or two guys in a garage or an individual who has a great idea for an app that can build something fast and get it out there and get it on all the devices, right?
Exactly.
So number of apps, you know, is there probably over 1 billion apps now if we add them all? Microsoft says something like 170,000 on their WinRT store kind of thing. Apple is, what, over 500,000 apps, and Android, you know, who knows how many apps because they're stores, but then people can just sideload.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
I wonder who wrote the billionth app for a device. Not sure.
1 billion served.
Yeah. But I think, you know, those are some of the measures that bring this imperative home, whether it's you're looking for a business opportunity as a developer or inside of your company. I can't think of a company that doesn't have a mobile strategy or a mobile imperative inside of their enterprise, inside of their small business.
And trying to figure it out still, because, you know, there are so many moving parts. And how do you make it work for your enterprise? How do you make it work for your business? If you're a development house, a coding house, and you've got a lot of clients, how do you maintain the code for your client, right? How do you ensure that it's supported? If you've got to hand it off to an internal team, how do all those processes work? And of course, the kind of tooling that Embarcadero provides gives a lot of answers and support to those kind of questions that developers face every day. Again, whether you're an ISV, whether you're an internal team at an enterprise, whether you're a software development house serving dozens of clients around the world. These are all very, very hard problems, and still a lot of unknowns because most of us haven't done it. I mean, we're really familiar doing it on the desktop,
yeah.
right? Especially guys like us who grew up in the industry. But, you know, still a lot of questions out there, and that's what's going to be exciting about the next 2 days, is answering a lot of those questions.
I had my Nokia communicator. I still have it. But,
yeah.
And this whole new planet, I think it was a couple things. Apple with their WWDC, one of their ads in their opening keynote videos about it's more about how can we change the world, enrich people's lives, use technology and so on. But again, there's a business imperative, I think, as well. And Larry Page also saying, look, maybe we've done 1% of what is possible with the technology, maybe less than 1%. So people thinking, oh, it's all been built, there's a billion apps, so it's all done. There's no new thing. There's no, the devices are, that's it, this whole new planet that is still evolving.
Needs to be explored.
Yeah.
Terraformed a little bit. And
a lot more.
Yeah, colonized. So this new planet, what's it like compared to the desktop world we're all very used to? Well, communication, rich media collaboration, they're all kind of at the center of much of these applications. Whereas before it may have been about data presentation and reaching out to databases and presenting that data and the windowing environments, etc. This world is very focused around taking media and communicating it. And it definitely started with voice and text. But now photos are this crazy phenomenon on mobile devices. I think this is most explicit in the example of Instagram, actually a company based right here in the Bay Area, and how that exploded. I think everybody knows that Facebook is probably the #1 photo sharing site in the world. Users expect this richer experience, and they're literally reaching out and touching their data on these tablet devices and mobile devices to be connected to others as well as their data. So this is a very different mindset and computing experience than the desktop model we've all known and loved for many years now. So what does that mean? Well, it means that the user experience and the responsiveness matters a lot. We're all lovers of native code here, I think, at Embarcadero. We love to produce native code because it creates a responsiveness and interaction that you just can't get in any other way, and it's a very visceral experience. I've often wondered, why is it that the touch model has taken off the way it has? And I think there's just something very human about reaching out with your fingers and touching these images and the information that you need to get by in your day-to-day life. And so they need to be responsive. These apps need to be as if you grab your coat from the coat hanger as you leave your home. It's got to be that kind of thing. When you pick up a pot off the kitchen stove, it's real. It's real time, as we say. It's how the world interacts. Users want their data on their touch devices to be the same. They want that interaction to be as real time as the physical world. And this means that in this new model, app design and user experience are critical. You can't just throw something up there and have it not be responsive and have it not be delightful in its design and its interaction. The bar's really been raised. And again, as coders, we may not be so focused on that. We may not think about that a lot. But if we're going to succeed in this new world, things that worked great with a windowing system and a mouse are just not going to necessarily cut it when we move those apps and those services over to this touch model. The other thing is, no device is an island, and this all began with the internet, but it's ending in the cloud. So yes, our desktop computers, especially with the internet, became, connected. Obviously, many of us were on corporate networks and used a lot of enterprise applications, but then the internet supercharged this with all kinds of consumer services as well as B2B, and they became connected. But this is subtly and profoundly different. Your smartphone in your pocket is always connected. And, this has been due to the carriers, the wireless carriers all around the world, who have done just this incredible job of ensuring that these devices can constantly be speaking to the network and therefore to other devices. If you've had an iPad or an Android tablet that's had a cellular connection, it changes everything. I know a lot of folks have their iPads and they've got a Wi-Fi radio in them, and they carry it around the home or the office. And my understanding is the great majority of iPad use actually is in the living room next to the TV. But if you've got your iPad or your iPad mini and you carry it around with you out and about, it's a transforming experience to have that rich interaction connected to the network and being able to get work done, communicate with loved ones. It really does catapult you into a whole new world of what computing can mean and what information technology means. And, you know, apps are becoming more service-oriented as well, meaning that, you know, the version numbers aren't as meaningful. You know, Outlook gave way to Gmail, and iTunes gave way to iTunes Match. Most recently, Microsoft Office, it's now a service with Office 365. And some of these are free. They're supported by advertising or other models. And some of them are paid for. But, you know, I've opened up a lot of Google applications, and magically there's a new feature there that I didn't have the day before. And I didn't have to do a rollout or a deployment. I didn't have to go and download the app. As you know, on Android, Google has had this quite a while. The apps update automatically in the background. Apple is going to get that with iOS 7 for the iPhone and the iPad. And so version numbers are going away. So as a developer, all of a sudden, you're not doing these big releases. It's a organic continuum of constantly adopting a more agile model of adding a feature, deploying it, seeing how it goes, and moving it around. So, you know, this is all because these devices and these apps are connected, and we need a way to ensure that that same model flows through in our apps. So all of a sudden, the cloud becomes very important. The connectedness becomes very important, because each of these apps on the smartphone, on the tablet, on the desktop are all portals into one set of services, one set of data that we're accessing in multiple different modes and different situations and different use cases. We've got this new world. There's this new planet to be explored. How do we get from here to there? And for that, I'm going to hand it over to JT.
Yeah, I think basically you just stay in beta forever.
Feature-driven development, just keep pushing it forward.
So thank you, Steve. Yeah, like you, it's been you know, very interesting and exciting to see the changes in this industry over the last 20 years, and to have it be so developer-oriented these days, for, you know, is personally very exciting for me, and I'm sure for everybody who's a developer in particular. What I'd like to do now is talk a little bit about, next slide, David, is, you know, a lot of you, especially those of you who have been using our tools for many years, have a lot of existing applications written for Windows. So I wanted to help you think of some ways to mobilize your apps and think about different models for delivering mobile applications. One thing I want to, you know, contrary to popular opinion, the mobile world is not all about the 99-cent app. And so I hope that you're not thinking that I have, you know, to get to mobile, I have to be able to get that killer 99-cent app that takes over the world. That happens, you know, for very few applications. But that, you know, there's many different ways to get your application into mobile, and many different ways to add value through mobilizing your application. So it's not, again, not just about having some kind of client app that resonates with you know, whatever's going on in the world for that time and is wildly successful, and you're selling a bunch of them for 99 cents. Instead, think more about perhaps either what do my customers need in order to take advantage of the work I've done in my application in the mobile space, or what are some new ways that I can help connect people or connect information from my app out into mobile devices. So we'll talk about 4 models in particular. starting with a look at different ways to get your application basically into mobile. Probably the obvious one is you could try to replicate much of what your Windows app does, but on a smaller form factor. And it's actually harder than it sounds, mainly because the form factor itself and the expectation that people have for a mobile application are different than they did for a Windows application. You had more real estate. There were different types of controls that you could use. You could certainly present a lot more data on a single screen in a desktop application. In a mobile application, you have a lot less screen real estate to work with. So that's, you really need to think through. You can certainly reuse all that functionality, but really think through how is the user going to interact with this, especially given that they, like Steve was saying, there's different expectations about what an app does today or how you interact with an app on a mobile device. But that is a valid way to think about getting to mobile. I'll take what I've done on my Windows app and I'll make a mobile version of it. Another way to think about it is extending your Windows app onto a mobile device. So this means that, you know, maybe a bulk of functionality in your Windows app still lives on Windows or on a server or some kind of tier somewhere in the cloud, but you add features to the mobile device that extend the capabilities of that Windows application. This third model, for lack of a better term, you know, it's about putting different types of functionality on different devices, and so what you're marketing or selling is different features on different devices. So your Windows app will do one aspect of the application, whereas your Android phone may do another aspect of it, whereas, you know, an iPad may do yet another operation that's part of a whole application. And then finally, another way to look at mobilizing your Windows applications is to take advantage of all this great services infrastructure that's really been built over the years, whether that's taking functionality you've built and pushing it into the cloud via something like an Amazon Azure or the Microsoft service, or even taking advantage of services that are being provided by others. And this back-end as a service market that's really been growing over the last few years. So there's many different ways to get functionality into your app, to expose functionality at different touch points, whether it's desktop, whether it's mobile devices, etc. So in the replication model, basically what you're doing again is you're taking an app that was written for Windows and you're making it available and workable within a mobile device. And a really good example of this might be a point-of-sale type of application. For many years, these have been delivered via Windows kiosk-type machines. And so you see here, for example, an HP. This is basically a desktop computer. You got the desktop sitting on the side of the system here. You have a monitor, a keyboard, cash drawer, receipt printer, and a scanner, and a credit card swiper. So this may have been the model that's been prevalent now for the better part of 20 years. You still see these kinds of things when you go into, say, a Home Depot, for example, and you're doing your own checkout. It's basically a Windows system, point of sale. You're swiping your credit card. All these pieces are attached. So these folks have seen, hey, I can also enable more people to utilize a point-of-sale application. And a couple of really cool things have happened in that space. Payment systems, for example, you can take payment many different ways. But one of the more interesting ways is the Square, which is a little plug right into your headphone jack, and it can read credit cards, and they have good rates. And so this is a way for you to easily monetize or be able to take, the way that most people are paying today, which is most people don't carry cash around, carry their credit cards around. So you can take this point-of-sale app and bring it into a tiny little device, like an iPad, pop a Square on it, and you basically have taken that whole system and converted it into a mobile version of that. And that gives you a lot more flexibility in where you can use it. You could take it with you to a swap meet in your local town. If it's 3G enabled, now you cash isn't the problem. Somebody wants it and they don't have the cash. Hey, you got a credit card? Swipe it right here and we'll be done. So this is just one example of a replication model. I think it probably works best when you have an application that can essentially reuse a UI that is presented full screen in Windows and can translate to a full screen on a tablet. For example, certainly those Windows applications that are more full-featured with regard to how they present their data in the desktop, this may be a tougher model to look at. But this is definitely a viable model, and you have different ways to get your app out there through all these distribution channels that we have today as well. Another way to look at monetizing or mobilizing your application is expanding your application. So the idea here is your Windows application is probably doing the bulk of the work. So in this example, maybe this is a software that's used inside of a medical office, and the Windows application is presenting the customer's records, the patient's records, and let's say perhaps you need to get an X-ray. So the X-ray may be taken again through the Windows application, but it can be expanded or extended into the mobile space. Your doctor can bring an iPad in, show your X-rays right there on the tablet. So, this is a way to think about how do I take information that for maybe a better part of a decade I've been doing on Windows, but make it available in a way to my customer. And the information that you present to them doesn't have to be, again, all their information like you see in this Windows customer screen, but really the information that matters. In this case, they want to see their X-ray. Did I break my arm or not?
Or do I really have a cavity in the tooth? My dentist is all digital X-ray.
Awesome.
And digital mouth, tooth layout and measuring. And
We're definitely starting to see a lot more of this. Many years ago, I had worked at an embedded Linux company, and this used to be done on a very specific machine with embedded software, and it was a machine that wasn't necessarily easy to move around or extend. And those guys, way back then, especially when Android first started coming out, started saying, "Hey, this may be something. This may have something." And to see all the devices that are built around that now is really impressive. So this is just going to improve our, like in the medical space, for example, our interaction with our doctors.
Yep.
So just one example. Again, I'm just trying to give you ideas on how to use what's available to you to mobilize your application. This marketing model really is about how do I provide different types of features on different types of devices, and gives you many different types of monetization points as well. So for example, you may have written a software or an audio mixing tool on Windows. And you could easily take something like that and make it available on the Mac as a desktop application. But, some of the ways that you can market more value around your tool, and this kind of is also looking back at that expansion model too, is adding features on the device that perhaps remote control, that Windows system. In this case, this user is able to manage his own headphone mix, but the software itself is living out on Windows or a Mac. So you could provide parts of this for free. You could easily do in-app purchasing. Actually, in any one of these systems, in this particular industry, there's a big third-party industry around plugins into these environments to do different kinds of processing, audio processing. So I think it's a pretty good example of where people who are building these types of applications are looking at how do I add more value? How do I also monetize at different touch points as well? In fact, I was just in the market recently myself as a hobbyist, making music for a mixing board. And one of the things that I decided early on is I had to have one that had some type of connection through my iPad. Mostly because when I'm recording something, I'm sitting behind a drum set. My mixing desk is 20 feet away, and it's a pain to get up and have to hit record and then walk back over and then clean all that up later. Now I can just hit play, remote control it from my iPad, and that was a buying criteria for me. So you need to also think about what are people expecting from desktop applications today too. You can't just stay confined to the desktop. You have to think about, how do I add more value by providing functionality through these mobile devices.
And again, also as all that hardware infrastructure has APIs and has interfaces. I was in Denmark, same thing. There was a company and they have all this high-end audio in a studio, and they can interface it. It has interfaces, and they want to build Delphi iOS apps or iPads to be able to control not just mixing board, which has had computer automation, but power amplifiers, everything, everything that you can imagine.
Exactly. These are actually really good control pads for these types of systems, which, again, typically you'd have to have someone sitting right in front of it in the past. Now you can do it from anywhere and use existing infrastructure, Wi-Fi or Bluetooth or other ways to communicate with the system. And a final model that is worth starting to take a close look at, if you haven't already, is the backend as a service side of the world, in the cloud in general. Certainly, we've talked about being able to take some of your application and tiering it and putting some of it in the cloud and using utility services like Amazon Execution Engine, for example, to host your applications. But there's also a lot going on in terms of features, especially features that help connect different types of devices and different types of interfaces that people are working with that are really just a great asset. And this is called the backend as a service model. So your Windows application, your Mac application, iOS app, they're able to hook into some of these APIs out there to, for example, one of the common ones is to push a notification across a bunch of different types of devices. And so the push is happening from a local client, maybe it's an iOS phone app, and you can push that notification through the cloud down to a desktop app, down to a Mac app, or any number of apps that are connected or listening for that notification. So this is a very interesting area to look into. Either you provide those services yourself or you look at a service provider. But this, I think, is a very interesting model in terms of taking existing functionality and expanding it to help mobilize your application. Now, throughout all these models are many different types of monetization strategies. In some cases, you don't need to monetize. Like in the case of the software mixer, to me, they didn't have to sell me the iPad software. In fact, they gave it to me, but I wouldn't have bought their desktop software without it. So they recognized this is part of our whole package. This is part of our overall value. You certainly can sell an app, or which has features in it through the app stores, or you can look at other monetization options around taking advantage of advertising, or doing in-app payments, so you can download additional features or provide additional features to your end user at a cost. The services model also presents other opportunities for monetization too, because now you're monetizing on the back end, not on the front end. So maybe this is a per use. Every time I want to send a push, there's some kind of monetization that happens, or maybe I want to back up my files. So there's, again, different ways to think about monetizing if that's something that you need to think about as you're mobilizing your application. And that's probably a whole nother long session in and of itself. But the purpose of this last 15 minutes or so was that if you're stuck in the box of thinking the only way for me to get into mobile is to make a 99-cent app and hope that people find it and it's wildly successful, we want to expand your thinking around what mobile is and what it means to your application, especially those that you've spent years building and probably have very happy customers on Windows. How do you add to their expectation that I'm in a mobile world now? What are you doing for me lately?
And a couple of CodeRage mobile notes. Again, Bruno Feren's session tomorrow on the iOS components for cloud.
Yep.
Which is part of a promotion. You can get those components if you get XE4. If you already have XE4, just go to register to use your downloads. You'll see them there. And Anders Olsen doing a session on Apple's push notification service,
right,
on how you can hook your Delphi iOS apps into a service side. And more to come, of course, as you look at, again, not just cloud platforms, but backends as a service. Yeah.
And just in case you haven't made the connection, all this cloud stuff too, we've been doing for a long time through DataSnap. So you may have already architected along these lines, or you should at least be aware that you have the technology to architect your applications along these lines as well in Rad Studio. So how do we see the market over the next several years, and what do we think is important in this market? And this is what we've been talking about in XE4 is this term multi-device true native. And this is where we think we, as a technology company, as a developer tools company, can add value to developers in this brave new world. So starting with multi-device, it's actually, if you've looked into or invested at all in iOS development and Android development, and of course Windows development, you probably have noticed they're very different environments. Yes, they're all operating systems. Yes, they all have APIs that do basically the same thing. But in each of them, you're using different APIs. You're using different languages. You have different development environments to work with. So it can be a very costly approach as well if you try to do these all with separate vendor tools that are available to you. So where we believe we can add value and why we've been investing so much in this area is in helping you as a development team do this more efficiently, and do it essentially by managing a single source code base. Being able to take one team, one code base, yet manage all these devices. And today we're looking at the problem as really just, it's kind of a bounded problem. We have Windows, we have Mac, we have iOS, we have Android as really the primary desktop or client environments, I should say. But in the future, who knows what's going to happen? I mean, we're already seeing some pretty astounding things starting to happen. Google Glass, so that's the start of, really the start of wearable computing. Of course, we've had smartwatches for a while, but we're seeing the capabilities really growing as well. Connecting into your home, in home automation, or into your automobile with infotainment. These are platforms that, in the past, just maybe deliver some information, and in your home, probably you had none of this before. But now, these types of systems are also app ready. Much like we talked about, this change, the big change for developers was this distribution model. Really, what happened is that these devices are really app ready. And so what we think we'll see in the future is many different types of devices. Some we may not have even thought of yet are going to be app ready. And it opens up a whole host of opportunities for you. But lots of challenges to keep up, to deliver applications. And that's where we think we can really, really help. And by giving you an API set that you can code to, knowing that we're going to be taking you to these other platforms, that you can take that investment and rebuild it and deliver on these future platforms as well. And of course, I've seen many questions already. When's Android coming? When's Android coming? Android is coming this year. We're going to be delivering it later this year. What's important to think about that is that, and this is true for the multi-device part of the story, is that any work you do on that mobile app for iOS is work you're doing towards Android too. Because when that tool chain gets delivered, you basically rebuild and you're on Android. So it couldn't be any easier. The other thing I want to point out is that, there's no real advantage to waiting for the Android support. iOS is, some of the statistics we've seen, and Apple was happy to share these last week, Apple's the moneymaker. That is a platform that people are making money on.
Yeah, I think at the keynote, Tim Cook, the CEO of Apple, showed a slide where 74% of all, I can't remember if it was profits generated or revenues generated in mobile development, come to the iOS platform.
Yeah, it's astounding. You know, and Android is an extremely popular platform, of course, and there's definitely money to be made there too. But iOS users tend to spend more money. I mean, I guess that's the outcome of that.
And this is why most mobile developers go to that platform first, and why we chose to support it first, because we know that that's where folks need to get the best return on their investment initially.
Exactly, and also, you know, the iPad is really what I look at in driving this bring your own device phenomenon. You know, the executives and the managers and anybody really bringing their iPads into the company and saying, well, how do I use all my apps on this? And so that's driving also a lot of development on enabling that particular device within an enterprise to be a first-class citizen. So multi-device, we think, is critically important. The other thing that we think is important, and it happens to be a strength of ours because we spent many years building compilers, is true native. There's lots of different ways to build an app for mobile devices. You can script an application using tools like HTML5 or Accelerator, PhoneGap. These are APIs that basically provide a JavaScript runtime to allow you to write JavaScript apps and deliver applications either through a web browser or through a packaged web app onto a mobile device. There's also your runtime approach, like Xamarin's Mono, for example, where you're generating bytecode, and you have a VM that's converting that into an application. But in each of these scenarios, you know, you are depending on a runtime to help you get your app onto that device, and that runtime it could you know, it's hard to optimize. You're basically, it's a black box for the most part. You are also depending on its ability to generate you know, optimized code on that CPU. So in contrast, where we talk about true native, what we're talking about is generating a binary with actual CPU instructions in it, so that once the kernel loads your app, it gets out of the way. Your app is running at full speed on that CPU and taking advantage of that hardware the whole way through. So true native in concert with multi-device is how we believe we can bring this value to you as a developer in this brave new world. A real quick view of how we do this from a compiler standpoint. Delphi and C++, as we move forward, are going to be sharing a common infrastructure now. You know, we just delivered in XE4 our first ARM compiler. So this is very exciting. This is first time in a very long time non-Intel processors have been supported by this tool set. You know, ARM, of course, is a critical component to the mobile space. So generating native code requires an ARM compiler. So this compiler architecture now, Delphi and C++ Builder can generate the same IR that talks to the same backend, that generates highly optimized code for both Intel and ARM platforms. So this is how we're going to, underneath the covers, get you native code on these platforms. And then above that, of course, with the FireMonkey APIs and framework, this is how you manage a single source code base that can generate a true native application for you. So the last thing I'd like to talk to you about is looking at what XE4 does for iOS development. And you're going to see a lot more of this over the next 2 days. I'm sure many of you remember in XE2, we presented a option to generate an iOS application with FireMonkey. But I'm here to tell you XE4 is greater than, much greater than XE2. And let's take a quick look at some of these key differences. So the framework, first of all, has grown considerably in terms of features and functionality. In XE2, this was the first release of FireMonkey. and now we're at FM3, the third generation of FireMonkey, with many more features. Most importantly, and this gets talked about a little bit later, in XE2 we were only able to enable a small portion of that framework, primarily the user interface components in FireMonkey. And this was because we had we took the approach of depending on the Free Pascal compiler. The Free Pascal compiler, which supports Object Pascal, doesn't support the full Delphi language. And in particular, features like runtime type identification weren't very well supported in that particular toolchain. So we decided at that point that we needed to enable our front end to deliver the full FireMonkey framework, that full architecture for you to build any type of application on this device. And when we were talking about all these different ways to expand or build your application, this requires the power of the full framework. You can't just do this with small UI control set on the client and deliver against all these options. So this was a critical decision point, which was to take our front end and build our first ARM compiler. So in XE4, that's what we did. In the past, the workflow in XE2 was you could basically lay out your UI, generate an Xcode project, copy that over to your Mac, open that in Xcode, and build that with Free Pascal. Now, what you have is a fully integrated solution inside Rad Studio. So when you build your application, and again, you're able to utilize the full framework now, when you go to build, it actually builds the binary for you on your Windows system. We're cross-compiling to build that ARM binary. And then we take care of passing that over to the Mac for you to deploy it, to package and sign it as needed to get it onto to the iOS device as well. But you never have to touch Xcode. After your initial setup with your certificates and all that kind of stuff, you never have to touch Xcode unless you have other needs for it. And actually, there are some really nice tools in Xcode. I believe we're doing a session on the instruments, for example. At WWDC, I actually spent about an hour in the instruments lab, and very impressive tooling that can help you get a lot out of analyzing your application, and they work just great with our binaries. The other thing about this is that in XE4, the features that we built expanded upon what desktop FireMonkey was, and bringing many mobile features and the beginnings of many mobile features and many more to come as well onto iOS. And this is future compatible with Android. So again, I mentioned, take that code that you're building for iOS today, and you're going to be able to rebuild that on Android when we make that toolchain available. And then probably the other area where I really like to focus is on data access and database technology, because that's something that we just simply couldn't do in XE2. In XE4, now you have access to not only the embedded SQL Lite database, but also our Interbase to Go and the new IB Lite database, which is a free-to-deploy version of Interbase to Go. So you get that local data access now as well, and the ability to really work with data on those systems, including the ability to work with DataSnap middleware. So, we talked about a lot of these models. All this is part of what's in XE4 to really help you take advantage of these different approaches to mobilizing your application and monetizing your application. So, like to close with, if you haven't looked at XE4 yet, or if you looked at it really at the surface, there's a lot going underneath the hood that has transformed that iOS support into a really full-fledged solution for iOS mobile today and for Android support later this year. So David, that's kind of what I wanted to share with the developers this morning, that of course, Rad Studio is a great way to solve a lot of these mobile problems, but also to help you think through different ways to mobilize your application, take that investment you made in Windows and expand it rather than trying to start wholesale with your 99-cent app out in the mobile space.
And JT and Steve, thank you. Don't worry about the time, folks. We have all day today, and we'll catch up during some of the breaks. I want to go through a few of the Q&A, the questions that have come in. I've been trying to triage. Sorry if I was typing while you were talking, everyone. Besides all the good mornings, I think you answered the Android question. We're working on it, right? JT, if you want to reiterate Android support, XE4, FireMonkey 3 is the road how to get started today.
Yeah. So when we release the Android toolchain, the code that you have built for iOS is immediately rebuildable and usable for Android. The Android support is targeted for later this year. And I'd like to impress upon you that there's really no economic advantage to waiting for that. In fact, you have a more of an advantage by getting started now, getting on iOS and getting on Android when that's released than waiting.
There was a question as you were talking, Steve, about version numbers and things like that. There's always internal build numbers that people can use. Even when Chrome comes in, it always tells me the latest version that it's running on. So we can always, as a developer, check, and users check to see what build numbers we have, for example, even if there isn't a version 12 or version 12.2 or whatever it might be.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I think is it Adobe? I think the Creative Cloud now, they're putting all of their apps in the cloud.
Yeah. And it's subscription only.
Yeah.
And, there's a feeling that this is kind of the way of the world. Obviously, there'll always be multiple business models, but it's exciting and it's different, and I think it's something a lot of us didn't expect. We know this has been very good for Adobe, by the way. A lot of users are frustrated by the our way or the highway approach that Adobe has taken with the Creative Cloud and the Creative Suite, but they have done very well by it. The revenues have shown a nice bump due to this model, so I think it's one that we all need to think about and consider.
And you can push updates like crazy. I mean, you can push new feature, versus waiting for a release of some kind.
Yeah. And, I mean, different users have different needs. I know that, some folks want to buy an outright license to Microsoft
and
Word.
disconnect
it and have it for 4 or 5 years because of their specific needs. But, myself, I think it's an insane bargain to be able to get Microsoft Office for $100 a year, constantly get updates and innovations, and run it on my Macs, my PCs, my iPhone. So it seems like a win-win all around for everybody. The developer makes money, and I want developers to make money. JT's comment about the 99-cent app, I think, was incredibly apropos. We shouldn't be shortchanging ourselves. We need to be charging for our work, and the quality will rise to the top, and people will pay for this stuff. And users benefit, because if developers are well funded and they're getting compensated for their efforts, then that means that customers and users around the world are going to get even greater quality software. So I definitely think that these new models are exciting, and we should be embracing them and seeing if they work for us or not.
And JT, a question here about, there was a couple of questions about C++ and Delphi. If they're both going to use the same compiler toolchain architecture, does that mean that you'll be able to use components from either and connect things together? And then the second part of that was, is the design and toolchain experience the same, whether you're using C++ or Delphi as we move into the future?
Yes to both. The advantage, so first of all, we spend a lot of time making C++ compatible with Delphi. It's what makes our C++ special too. In addition to supporting the language standard, we also make our extensions to make it workable with Delphi. And what we love about the Delphi way for C++ developers is the capabilities around visual design. This is why C++ Builder was created in the first place. I was around in those days, as David, when we were both C++ developers. Delphi, we're watching the Object Pascal team work with this new team, work with this new product called Delphi, and we were blown away. Of course, we were all proud of our C++ framework, OWL at the time, but there was something special about what Delphi delivered in terms of making developers more productive. And so the effort to make C++ compatible with that started back then and was C++ Builder. And that tradition of enabling C++ developers to experience that magic of Delphi is what C++ Builder has always been about. Over the years, we've had to use separate tool chains because that's just the way that these tools have organically grown. And we spend a lot of effort making sure that they're compatible and that our C++ compiler basically knows how to talk to that latest version of Delphi. Going forward, this is going to get better for us too, because managing a single tool chain is more efficient for us. This tool chain in particular, this back end, is very good, has a very good optimizer in it, allows us to easily get onto these new CPUs. This is how we got to ARM. And they're going to share the same infrastructure, so that's both good for us and good for you, and the overall interoperability between Delphi and C++.
When people see Android coming along, they think, oh, well, Android's got a Linux subset underneath. Does that mean that's a good road to us getting to Linux in the future?
Well, sure, absolutely. I mean, again, I mentioned that I worked at an embedded Linux company many years ago, and we all dreamed of Linux taking over the world, and it did in Android. And that to me is personally very gratifying to see that. And Linux does have an underpinning of C APIs. Of course, its runtime library with POSIX and all these other things are very C-oriented. And getting Delphi on there, especially because we're using native code, absolutely gives us a leg up on getting to supporting a more of a desktop distribution or server distribution of Linux in the future.
So great, thanks guys. We're a little bit over, and we'll play catch up. There are lots of questions we've been answering along the way, thanks to not only you guys here, but also the team Embarcadero there in Maidenhead and elsewhere. So any last quick words, Steve and JT, besides encouragement and cheerleading? Go, go, go. And this special offer here, get started in XE4 today.
I just say, enjoy the next 2 days. You got some great content, some great speakers, and hopefully this will help you better understand and prepare and succeed in this brave new world, as Steve put it.